Retirement Tips Radio is brought to you by Business RadioX, the voice of business in your community. Currently serving over 25 markets, the Business RadioX network is growing fast. We're teaming up with retired execs and established entrepreneurs to support and celebrate local business leaders. If you'd like to make additional income while making a difference, discover more at brxteam.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Retirement Tips Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have with us Tom Stevens, and he is with Smart Capital Management. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Before we get too far into things, tell us about Smart Capital Management. How are you serving folks?
Well, this is a second career for me, and I had another business. I was a banker. Started my own business after my bank failed. I'm actually retired once. My wife and I lived in Mexico for a while, and a couple of things. Number one, I was bored. I can't believe I retired early, and then I was bored. And then my wife got cancer, so we came back to Houston, and she didn't make it. So at this point, the first thing I did was, what do I do? What do we do after somebody dies? And I wrote a book. I kept good notes and wrote a book on, it's called Survivor's Handbook. This is exactly what you do, all the things you need to cancel, everything you need to be thinking about from a functional standpoint. And from there, I just discovered that I had a passion for helping people. And at this point in my career, my second career, I am focused on helping people make the most out of retirement.
Now, I don't know if this was an accident, but you also had a career in the military, right? That was part of your journey in your life. You went to the military. You came out of the military. You were an executive, and then you went through this tragedy, and that kind of inspired you to be an entrepreneur, kind of going your own way. In all of those different kind of career stopping points, how have they kind of led you to this point?
Well, certainly starting with the military, that taught me discipline. That taught me to how to work together as a team. After that, I was an senior executive with a bank, and that certainly taught me a lot about money, how money works in the global economy, and how to make money. And then I went off on my own, and then I learned what it takes to run a small business. I ended up with a business with about 300 people. It was a $10 million a year business. And so that was a second learning experience. And then I was retired, another learning experience. Kind of amazing that step by step, I went from one activity to the next, and I learned everything in steps, learned how to be retired, and then turned around and figured out, well, without a purpose, without a reason to get up every morning, then you slowly start to decline. And so that's why I got back into this business. With the last stop with being a caregiver for my wife. And I guess at that point, that was a 24/7 everyday experience as a caregiver. And after my wife died, I really understood that you have to have a passion. You have to have a reason to get up every morning. You have to have that determination. And finally, I discovered I just really liked helping people. I have this long background from military to banking to entrepreneur to being retired to being a caregiver, and now it's time for me to give back.
And so service is at the heart of all the steps, it sounds like.
That's what it seems like going back and looking back. Yes, it does.
And was there something when you were very young that kind of inspired you to lead this life of service?
Actually, I don't know that there was. It just seemed like the steps just happened to be there, and I took the steps. I don't know how else to describe it. It just seems like it unfolded. And now I'm looking back, 70 years old, and well, it's been an interesting life. I'm grateful for everything that's happened, and I am, well, I'm trying to give back at this point.
Now, when a person is going through and they're finding you now at this stage in your life and your career, they're probably thinking about retirement, and they're towards the end of their working career. At least in their minds, they think they're at the end of their working career, I would think. Is there anything from when you went through that first retirement mindset, like in order to have a smart retirement, are there some steps you should be taking ahead of time? Like you were able to create that manual for people going through the caregiving. Is there a manual to help someone kind of be prepared for retirement?
Well, there's bits and pieces out there, but I have another book that's called Smart Retirement, and the very first chapter addresses that from that particular angle. Are you really ready to retire? There's so many people that they look at retirement as, well, I've reached a certain age, it's time for me to quit, or I hate my job and I'm just going to quit. I'm going to reach this age and I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to play golf, or I'm going to sleep in, or I'm going to not have to worry about deadlines. But yet that gets old real quick. And again, in my book, Smart Retirement, I've got a whole chapter on it, on how to assess your goals and how to assess your where you're at in life, what makes you happy, what more you'd like to do with your life. You need to have some kind of an assessment to get started, and then you can continue on with. Well, that helps put it into perspective, I guess I can say. And once you understand what your goals are, what drives you, what makes you happy, what do you really want to do, then you can maybe take the next step and figure out, is there another job that I want to do, or do I want to volunteer? Or if I want to volunteer, what is it that I'm most interested in? How can I help? How can I get this sense of fulfillment and satisfaction? So I've tried to capture that in a chapter in my book, and I've got a workbook in the appendix. I've got what we just talked about, the different steps on how to make that assessment.
Because a lot of people focus on either a date in time or a number that they're kind of working towards, and they're not thinking through, well, every day I got to do something, right? There's 24 hours in every day, whether you're ready for it or not, they're going to happen, and you have to fill that time. And if you don't have a compelling why and something that's getting you excited about waking up every day, I would imagine it gets old, playing golf every day, even though in your mind that sounds fantastic, maybe at certain age points, or if you're frustrated with your work. But if you're doing that every day, that's going to get boring for a lot of people, and that you need to have kind of a bigger why. And what I'm hearing you say, that serving and helping helps you get fired up every day because you're excited about helping somebody today.
Well, again, that's absolutely correct. When I retired at age 55. My business was kind of winding down, and out of the blue, my wife just said, "You know what? Your business is winding down. I don't like what I'm doing. Why don't we just retire?" And at the time, I thought this was a great idea, but within 3 months, we sold the house, packed up, moved to Mexico, and started living the life of an expat. And at that point, I discovered, boy, I am kind of bored. I still, I get up every morning, 6 o'clock, just like I normally did, run downstairs, get a cup of coffee, and thinking, all right, I got to do something. What am I going to do today? And well, there's nothing to do. And just little by little, I started discovering that I really need to have a reason to get up in the morning. You can't just lay around. You can't just play golf. You can't just not have some motivation for getting up. So that's when I decided I need to do something to regenerate my enthusiasm for life, and that's how I got back involved in the financial business. Came back to the U.S. I did some training, got licensed, and I was going back and forth working in his business when my wife got cancer.
And then now you're helping people kind of get their financial and maybe healthcare life in order for them to live that retirement maybe with a bigger why, because you're coming at this, I'm sure, a lot different than, that young financial advisor that's advising them. Your life perspective of having been there, done that, and being kind of an age that they are not yet there, but they're approaching, gives you a different kind of lens on the world. You can, I would imagine, counsel them with a lot more depth.
I think that is what differentiates me. When I talk to some of the younger advisors, they tend to have a much more cavalier attitude about retirement, about somebody else's money, about what they should and shouldn't do with their money. But they're coming at it from not from a place of having been there and done that, but just from what they think, what somebody else has told them, what they're viewing life from their own perspective through their own lens. And so me, on the other hand, I've been there. Even though I retired comfortably, we've gone through a couple of downturns in the economy, and it still gives me stomach aches when the market is down. And so that approach, that gives me a different approach for how I manage people's money. But again, the very first step that I talk to everybody about is, what are you going to do? Really, what are you going to do when you retire? What is going to give you the motivation to get up every morning? And we try to get past the glibness of, well, I'm just going to lay around, or I'm going to play golf, or I'm just going to fish, or whatever. I try to help people understand that you do need to have some reason to get up in the morning, and it's got to be a serious reason. It's not golf and grandkids and the like. It's a time to reassess what your life has, what's brought you to this point, and what's going to make you happy for the rest of your life. And I think for most of us, it's service in some way.
And that once you kind of determine that true north, then it becomes a lot easier to create the plan, right?
Absolutely. So if you want to volunteer, that we can take your assets and construct an income plan based on that. If you want to go back to work in a different field, or start your own business, there's several different opportunities that are going to be available to you, and that is going to drive how we construct your income plan for the rest of your life.
And then, so then, do you look at these kind of different? I would guess these kind of things that are difficult to plan for. Like, I don't know what health is going to be for me or my spouse. I don't know how long I'm going to live. How do you kind of take all these unknowns into consideration when you're developing a plan?
Well, I guess that is that's maybe one of the first things we look at, that there are going to be unknowns. Every one of us that are healthy think that we're always going to be healthy, and our spouse is going to be healthy, and every one of us that are working and making money think that money is just going to be coming in, and that's just not the case. Things can happen. Life happens. My wife was 63 when, out of the blue, no symptoms, she was diagnosed with lung cancer, stage 4. We certainly didn't expect that. We expected to be retired and live our life as expats and travel. And all of a sudden, life changed for us. And so those are the kinds of things that I want everybody to focus on, that life can change in a minute. And statistically, 7 out of 10 people that are age 65 today are going to need some kind of long-term care. And that means at some point, life is going to change dramatically for either them or their spouse. So that's probably one of the first things we focus on, is we need to have a foundation of a stable income. And there's a number of different ways we can do that, a number of different avenues that we can take, but that's probably the first thing we think about, and that's the first thing I focus on, is how do we develop a stable income for the rest of your life?
And then you look at it like you chart kind of where they're at today, and then, you make an assumption to how long they're going to live, right? And then okay, there's going to be Social Security is going to come into play, Medicare is going to come into play. We know those are kind of things in the kind of roadmap. So you kind of can adjust those and toggle kind of your strategies based on those, some of those kind of things for sure are going to happen at some point.
Well, yes, that's absolutely correct. You mentioned Medicare. It's amazing how many people think that they're going to turn 65 and get free health care for the rest of their life. And that's just not the case. I mean, Medicare itself is very, very complex. There's original Medicare has 3 parts. Part A, hospitalization, which is free, but Part B is not. Part B is outpatient. Part D is drug, and drugs, your drug coverage is going to change dramatically from year to year. There's Part C, that where the government says, we're going to get out of this and we're going to hand this over to an insurance company. And so that's the Medicare Advantage. There's also a Part D that would cover, Medicare has not only premiums, but it has co-pays and deductibles and out-of-pocket amounts. And so you can also buy supplemental insurance. One of the biggest issues around Medicare is that once you make that decision at age 65, you are pretty much locked into that decision for the rest of your life. And people don't understand that. Social Security. Social Security is interesting. If you wait until you are age 70, you potentially can get as much as almost $3,800 a month today. That's about $45,000 a year. And you know what? With a couple that both wait till they're age 70, that's about $90,000 a year they could be making. So that's another thing we need to look at right away. Most people are thinking, maybe I'll take, as soon as I can, I'll turn on Social Security, but there's a huge benefit to waiting. And so that figures into our plan also. How can we get to age 70 without turning on Social Security? And just on and on.
Now, what about where does kind of some of these health unknowns fit in, like long-term care? Like a lot of people, you mentioned that I think 2/3 are going to need some sort of care like that down the road. Is that something that is even on people's radar? Because like you said, they feel good now. Like why pay insurance on something that may or may not happen, 20 years from now?
Well, that that is absolutely a critical issue that I try to get everybody to understand, that things can happen, and when they do, it can get to be very, very expensive. I just see too many people that have not thought about that, and they're living comfortably, maybe with a spouse on both incomes. But if one of those people end up in needing long-term care or in assisted living, that can almost bankrupt somebody. If the money that two people were living on to support the couple in a single household, all of a sudden one of them needs to go to a separate household, and it's going to cost more for that. It causes serious financial drain, and most people aren't thinking about that. So there are alternatives to the traditional long-term care insurance, and that's something that I'm really focusing on now, especially for people that are maybe 10, 15 years away from retirement. There are different programs now with certain life insurance programs like 7702 IUL programs that not only end up creating a tax-free income stream for life, but also have ability to get at the death benefit to help pay for long-term care. Certain annuities offer the same kind of coverage. So we look at how can we get maybe a double bang out of some of these financial products. How can we both structure an income for you that has a benefit that will help you pay for long-term care should you need it?
Now, it sounds like this is why you need somebody on your team that's kind of knows this stuff, because there's so many variables. There's so many unknowns. There's so many things you just can't possibly know as a layperson kind of getting into this. At what point do you think a person in their career should start thinking, okay, I got to start getting my team together here, because I don't know if the wealth manager I had when I was 30 is appropriate when I'm 50. You got to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because I would think you need an expert, a Sherpa, to kind of guide you through this, because there are so many things that you just can't possibly know about.
I guess, again, to answer that question, I think that, you're absolutely right that the advisor that you had helping you accumulate your wealth maybe early on is maybe not the right person to help guide you as you get closer to and into retirement. And maybe my rule of thumb is when you are about 10 years away from retirement, maybe 15, that's even better, but 10 to 15 years away from retirement, at that point, things are different. We can't take the chances with our finances, with our investments that we took when we were in our 20s and 30s. And we still need the money to grow, but it needs to grow carefully. We can't afford to have a big hit like what happened in 2008. We've got to be a little more cautious. We need to start thinking about programs that I just mentioned. Is there a way? Are there programs out there that would be able to provide a steady income stream, guaranteed income stream for the rest of our life? And what other benefits can we get out of them, like long-term care, like access to the death benefit, maybe if we have a terminal illness? So, using the football analogy, probably 10 years out, and hopefully 15 if you're thinking about it, but That's the red zone for retirement. And at that point, it's going to be critical that you structure your finances and maybe you structure everything else that you'll be ready to go into retirement when you're ready to flip that switch. So
now, if you were that red zone pre-retiree and you're in that zone now, what are some advice that you can, like what's some low-hanging fruit that maybe they can do on their own before they're ready to talk to an expert like you? What are some of the kind of the big rocks that they should be paying attention to?
Well, probably number one, I would say, is we need to focus on how much you're going to need in retirement. If you've never done a budget, and most people have not, we need to look at how much are you spending today and what do we think we're going to need into retirement. Then we need to look at how much we've got saved so far, and is that going to be enough? It's time to reassess exactly where we're at financially, and do we need to start upping the amount that we're saving for retirement? Do we need to figure out if we're not going to have enough? Maybe we push back our plans for when we think we're going to retire. The other things that we talked about a minute ago, long-term care. Should we be thinking about a policy for long-term care, or are there other alternatives for that? What are we going to do about health care? We need to educate ourselves. We don't necessarily have to have an advisor for that, but we do need to educate ourselves on what Medicare is all about. Maybe those are the things that I would think of. And then finally, back to how we started this conversation, and that is, what exactly are we going to do when we retire? What's going to make us happy? What's going to give us that sense of fulfillment? What's going to motivate us every morning to get up? So those are the things that I would suggest that we start working on.
Yeah, I'd add to get that book, Smart Retirement, from you, Tom. I mean, I think that gives you that framework to start thinking about these big things and start kind of planning accordingly. Because I think when you're younger, you're thinking about accumulation and wealth, and then when you're older, you got to make that shift to like kind of income stream, and how am I going to manage that, which is a different objective. And if you're not clear and having a true north, it's difficult to do that, I think, without help. So I'm with you all the way when it comes to that. So it's important to find the right team member to help guide you through this.
Well, again, I think you're absolutely right. And it just, I can look back and say this came on too fast. It just seems to me that it wasn't that long ago when I was going to college, or I was in the military, and then raising a son, and life just flies. And the next thing we know, we are at retirement age, and we haven't maybe planned well enough for it. And there can be some disasters if we don't step back and start that planning early, and at the very least in the red zone.
Well, Tom, if somebody wanted to learn more, maybe get a hold of your book or have a conversation with you or somebody on your team, what's the website?
The website is www.smartcapman.com. So Smart Capital Management, abbreviated, www.smartcapman.com.
Well, thank you. So the books there, you have several books, right?
The books are available on Amazon under Thomas Stevens. There's 5 books out there. And they're available on Amazon.
Well, thank you again for sharing your story. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Retirement Tips Radio.
Retirement Tips Radio is brought to you by Business RadioX, the voice of business in your community. Currently serving over 25 markets, the Business RadioX network is growing fast. We're teaming up with retired execs and established entrepreneurs to support and celebrate local business leaders. If you'd like to make additional income while making a difference, discover more at brxteam.com.